In this clip, we're going to create a quick UV set for our tree. So here we are back in 3ds Max, and we're going to go ahead and start adding those UVs. Before I do that though, I need to import my texture. So I'm going to go into my materials here. And it's going to go into diffuse, bitmap, and let's go ahead and find it. You can find it in the working files, or you can use the one you created. I called it tree alpha 01. So let's go ahead and apply that on our tree. Let's go back to the parent and make sure that our show shaded selected. And as you can see, nothing happened, and that's because the tree doesn't have any UVs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the turbo smooth. Go ahead and actually the wireframe mode here. And I'm going to go ahead, right click and convert it to editable poly. So I'm going to go ahead and add unwrap UV, open UV editor. I'm just going to push it here. I want to make sure I see both the UV editor and the tree here. And I'm going to go ahead actually right now. I'm just going to hide the UV editor. I'm going to go select the edge. And I'm just going to select the edge where I want the seam. So I think probably on the outside would be a bit better to do that. Usually you would try to hide the seam inside, but in our case, because we're using ZBrush in the end, we want to try and fix up the seam in the end. So we're going to use the outside layer. It'll just be a little bit easier to sculpt in there. I'm just going to go scroll down here, and we have a wrap here. I'm just going to go and unfold the strip. So as you can see, now if I open the UV editor, our tree is just perfectly UV to a square here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually select this edge here. Going to go and ring UV and then loop UV. And then I'm just going to go align these straight. Here we go. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select these and just pack those. Here we go. And these are our ends. They don't really matter much. At this point, I'm just going to shrink them to a very small dot. It doesn't really matter. We're not making UVs for a game here. We're just doing it for our mask. So what I want to do is I want the tree to use the entire texture here. So I'm just going to make sure actually the texture is visible. I'm going to go ahead and drag that right about here. And make sure it's perfectly in the beginning and the end. And as you can see, it's slightly stretched right now. And that's because we're basically using a square, although it's quite a big rectangle here. So I'm going to go ahead and actually scale those down. Right about here. And I'm just going to use the vertices at this point because I want to see, and I'm actually going to hide the edges. I want to see what this would look like in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and drag these a bit more down. And let's just select all the vertices right here in the middle. Right about here. I just want to make sure that my edges are at the same place, but not the inside. And what I'm going to do is going to go Tools, Relax, by Polygon. I'm going to actually try and apply it one by one. So I kind of get to where I want it to be. That's about it. And also, as you can see, we have the tip here and it's quite skewed. So I'm just going to go in and select where the tip is, right about here. And just going to go ahead and apply because we don't want it to be, we don't want too many lines in there. So as you can see, we have a little bit of a seam problem here. But it's nothing to be worried about because that's something we'll fix in ZBrush in the end. So that looks pretty good to me. Perfect. So now I can go ahead and do the same thing for everything else. But before I do that, I'm just going to select these caps here. And just going to go and move them to the white area of the texture. Just to make sure that there will be no changes to those in ZBrush. I can close the UV editor now. Right click, convert to editable poly. Or you can just collapse your layers here. And I'm going to go ahead and click Turbo Smooth, select my smoothing groups again, maybe make it 2 or 3, it doesn't really matter, you want it as smooth as possible for ZBrush. And that looks pretty good to me. So I can go ahead and add one more, so I'm going to go here again, remove the Turbo Smooth, convert to editable poly, add our texture, UV editor, select the edge I want the seam to be on, so maybe here. Somewhere like this. And I'm just going to go peel those again. Open the editor. Find our mesh. Pack that. And in here, I don't actually want it to go the same as the previous one, simply because I want to align it a little bit more. I'm just going to select these caps again and move them here. So again, I'm just going to go in and select these, loop. And again, I'm just going to go in and get it all the way across and stretch it down. So as you can see, it's slightly more denser than the other shape, and that's because this shape is slightly thinner than the other one. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and smooth this, relax that first. Use polygon. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and make those a little smaller, just so we have the same consistency of lines, because we don't want the branch to look any different than the rest of the mesh. And I'm going to go in and try and see if I can align this a little bit better. So I'm going to move these down. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, if you can just get a couple lines to align, that will already work. And they don't have to be the same thickness, because that's again something we can fix in ZBrush. So I'm just going to move that up here. These align, these sort of align. This would work pretty well. These kind of align. And that aligns. That looks pretty good to me. Next thing I'm going to do is just going to select the tip again. And just make it soft selection here. Select about 100 for the smoothness here. And just going to scale it down a bit more. Just so the tip is not too oversaturated with lines, because it will look slightly odd. So that looks pretty good to me. So convert that to editable poly. And that's pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the rest of the mesh. And in the next clip, we're going to go ahead into ZBrush and start applying that mask.